Hello, and welcome to the engraving room at the Corning Studio. My name is Heather Hartle, and I'm a glass engraver. I use a lathe to engrave my glass. I use diamond, copper, and stone wheels in the process, and my practice is predominantly cameo engraved glass. The first phase of the renovation has been completed. And with that, we now have a new dedicated engraving room, which has been thoughtfully designed and laid out for 6 students. All have their own lathe and their own set of diamond wheels for their engraving projects. The engraving room, we have a plaque over here. The engraving room has been named after and in honor of 2 glass engraving masters, Max Erlacher and Jurgi Hartseva. Max Erlacher emigrated from Austria to the United States. He trained in Austria as a glass engraver. He worked at Steuben Glass for a number of years, and he worked in his own engraving business. Jurgi Hartseva was trained in what is now the Czech Republic and lived there. He taught internationally, and both of these masters taught repeatedly at the studio over the years. And they have very different styles, and I have been privileged to study with both of them each twice over the years. The studio is committed to supporting and advancing the teaching of glass engraving. It's a great place to come and give glass engraving a try or come and advance your skills. In support of the engraving class this week, the curator of modern glass, Amy McHugh, is going to give us a guided tour of 19th century British and American engraved glass on Thursday afternoon, and all of the students in the studio are welcome to attend. My class is called Engraving Imagery, and the students learn to use the lathe, and I teach them to use the diamond wheels, the stone wheels, and the copper wheels. Each student has the ability to use one of 3 types of blanks. The first is the classic cameo blank, which is what I predominantly use, and this is a base color coated with solid white, and they'll engrave through the white to expose the background glass and create their imagery. These are color overlay blanks, and this is clear glass with a thin layer of blue over top, and the artist would engrave through the blue to expose the clear and create their imagery. Also, we have some clear glass blanks that they can practice their intaglio engraving on. So this is a finished piece of mine, which is now resides in the cases out in the hallway. And this is Dallying and Dahlias. And this was completed last year and donated to Corning Studio. And it will help raise money for scholarships for the studio. So I want to explain something about the tools of engraving. The diamond wheels are the newest on the scene, and they are sintered diamonds, which means the diamond is embedded in a metal all the way through to the core, so it will last a long time if it is well cared for. And it comes in different grit sizes or diamond sizes, and from very rough, which grinds the glass very quickly, to very smooth, which grinds it slower but gives you a finer finish. So I have several diamond wheels that I'll be using in my demo today. The other type of wheel is a stone wheel, and these are either silicon carbide or aluminum oxide embedded in a clay, vitrified clay bond. And the silicon carbide wheels are typically much coarser. They move the glass, they will grind the glass very quickly, but they leave a very coarse finish on the glass. The aluminum oxide has grit sizes that range from about 180 to 320 in various sizes, and you can compare grit sizes in this case to like the grit of sandpaper. If you're familiar with that, you have a very rough sandpaper to a very fine sandpaper, and the number goes up as the finish gets finer, and it's exactly the same with the stone wheels, with the diamonds, and with the grit that's used on the copper wheels. These stone wheels have a leaded bushing, and they are attached to a threaded spindle, so that one spindle, you can use many different wheels on it. It's not a dedicated spindle for each profile. These are softer. The diamonds, the profiles are fixed. You cannot change them. You buy the size you need, and that's the size you use. That's what you use until it's gone. And you probably will not outlive that diamond if it's well cared for, or will outlive that diamond. The stones are softer, and as they get used, their profile has to be, the profile is this side of the stone, what addresses the glass. And it has to be refreshed frequently because it is soft. And so it takes a little work to use this, but the beauty of it is that if you don't like this profile, you can change it. You can reprofile it quite easily. And when it does need truing, or sorry, when it does need dressing, it's easy to do. And so you don't need a bunch of spindles with stones, just a bunch of stones and a couple of spindles. Copper wheel is the oldest type of wheel that was used in an engraving, and probably predominantly used when in Steuben glass. And each wheel is riveted to a spindle, and that's permanently attached there. It cannot be changed unless, you know, it gets so small that you cut it off and start all over again, riveting in a new wheel onto the spindle. But you typically have a set of about 30 wheels for an engraver, and they come in all different diameters and thicknesses, and you can profile them to your need. The advantage to these wheels is they can be reprofiled. They can be used with different grits, so if you want it to cut faster and rougher, you use maybe a 150, 180 grit. If you want it to have a silky smooth finish, then you increase your grit to 320 or 400 for a line wheel. So there's a lot of variables with these wheels, but they're very versatile, but they are more labor intensive, and they do not cut as fast as the diamonds. So, but they have a beautiful finish, and if you're willing to invest the time in learning, it's worth it. So the instructor's bench has all of the copper wheels. Not that all instructors are going to use them, but they're over here, and if there are students interested in learning how to use them, then they can come over here and pick one, and the instructor will show them how to use it. It's a little trickier than the diamonds. The diamonds are, you know, plug and go. So the diamonds are run with a water feed. The stones are run with a water feed, but the copper wheels are run with a leather tongue. I have a couple of them up here. You need a leather tongue that's dedicated to whatever grit you're using. And the grit is mixed with an oil in one of these little pots, and you dip your finger in and feed the wheel, and the leather will keep the grit on the wheel. So I'm going to be working with diamonds today, so I'm set up for a water feed. This is the piece that I am going to be working on. On this side, you just see what the blank looks like when you've drawn the design on. And then on the other side, I've started to do the engraving, and this is where I'll be working today. And the background of the design, which would have been all of this space surrounding my imagery, has been removed. It's fairly smooth, but it's going to require, some more work once all of the imagery is completed. I have started to work on this flower here. I'm not completely finished. I'm going to start today engraving this other flower. This one is tiny little engraving, and I'll work on that some other time. But I'm going to start with the leaves. I've marked which are the leaves in this design so that I don't have to think about it. I can just say, this is a leaf, this is a leaf. Now, when you're doing cameo engraving, you're working with planes, and you're looking for what plane or what object in your image is the farthest back, and that's where you're going to start. You're going to engrave the one that's farthest back, and then the one that lays on top of that, and do all of those, and keep moving to the center of the flower, working on all the similar planes at the same time. So that, and you can see that's been done here. My intention, this is a leaf, 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 and this is all blossom. And I've got some more work to do because my vision for this piece is that the leaves will be a soft blue, and the blossom, these are gardenias, will be a stronger white and more sculptural. So I'm going to get started on the engraving now. When I engrave, I have these water deflectors that stream the water hopefully down into the bucket and not down my sleeve. And I use safety glasses while I'm working. So I choose the wheel size that's appropriate for where I'm going to be engraving. And I'm going to get started with this one. And when you put the spindle in your lathe, this lathe is a spot sear lathe. All of the lathes in this room are spot sear lathes. Each student gets to use one. They are the Cadillac of engraving lathes. They were designed in the early 1900s and built throughout the 1900s, and if they are well cared for, then they will last the engraving lifetime of several engravers. They're well-built machines, and they are well cared for here. And so there is a notch in the mandrel of the lathe, and there's a notch on the spindle. And there's either, if it's a lead-jacketed spindle, the notch is raised up. And in these steel spindles, it's recessed. But the theory is the same. You line up the notch on the spindle with the notch in the mandrel and give it a good shove, and you should hear that nice clink, which means it's in there nice and tight. And then you adjust all of your, the arm and this piece so that your sponge is laying on the wheel, and then you turn on the water. And this is an innovation that for this new engraving room, which I absolutely love. The water is piped in, and you just turn this little thumb screw and adjust it, and get started with your engraving. But first, if we can zoom in, before I get started with this, can we zoom in on this? I've done a little bit of engraving to show you what the marks look like. These 3 marks are with diamonds, and these are German or European numbers, D64, D46, and D30, which correlates to the diamond size. So this is larger diamonds, so it'll be rougher, smaller diamonds, and smaller still. This was a stone with a miter wheel. The miter is actually, looks like a V. I don't know if you can see that, but the profile is a V. Yeah, you can see it like that. And it makes a sort of a marquee cut. And so this is with this marquee stone, or I'm sorry, miter stone. And then this mark was with a copper wheel with 320 grit. So. We use these elbow pads. First off, to rest your elbows, but secondly, to elevate your elbows a little bit so that when you hold your piece, it's closer to the wheel. And I want to sit up nice and straight and comfortable. These blanks I mentioned were blown here at Corning by the tech staff. They are beautifully blown. You can see the nice even cameo layer over the base color layer, so I know that the thickness is the same all the way through the piece, which is wonderful to know. So I'm going to start on this leaf because it's the lowest one. This leaf is over top, so the first thing I'll do is kind of snug up against the line of the petal that goes over this leaf. I'm starting to get down to fairly thin. I'm seeing some blue come through now. I don't want to take it all the way down yet. I want to work more of the design and then adjust as needed. But eventually I will work towards having some modeling in this leaf. You can see some of that in here. This leaf is much smaller, so it's harder to get the idea. Okay, so I'm trying to maintain the center of the leaf as I engrave. Change to another wheel that has, this wheel is very rounded. It would probably make an olive shape or an oval shape. And I'm needing something with a little bit straighter edge to get up snug against the next element in my design and sharpen it up some. And tidy up the outside edge of this. Some of the background has not been removed. Okay. So in my design, this leaf is the next level, and but it's still, let's see, actually, yeah. So I'm going to get started here, separating this leaf from the petal above it. Some of these lines I'll go back later with a smaller, sharper wheel, either with the diamond burs or copper wheels, small copper wheels, and sharpen up the lines so that the difference between the different planes will be more obvious and sharp. So there's a lot of steps to this process. This is, just the beginning. Sometimes you have to dry your piece because it's going to look completely different dry than wet. Everything looks shiny when it's wet. Sometimes it's harder to see the progress you're making. Starting to do a little shaping of the wheel and give it some undulation so it isn't just flat. And I will go back after I'm satisfied with the shape of each leaf and the color of each leaf and the finish. I'll go back with a fine copper wheel and put some veining in the leaves. But I'm still too far away from completion to do that. But the veining will be done with a small copper wheel, probably with a 400 grit. It'll be a line wheel and 400 grit, which will be a nice smooth cut. Not very deep, just suggestive. Okay. I'm going to get started on this larger leaf now. It's going to require more cutting in down here. I'm going to keep this small wheel on because I'm going to be cutting in and out of these small spaces. And then I'll switch to a larger wheel because I have more area to cover. take a little bit of this background down so I can see the edge of the leaf better. I'm going to use this larger wheel now because the area that I'm working on here is a little bit larger. In engraving, you try to use the largest wheel you can for the job, but you also have to take into factor your comfort level with that size of wheels. So, of course, the more you do engraving, the more your comfort level, you increase your comfort level with the larger wheels and being able to get in and out of tight spots with them. Once I've gone in with the smaller wheel and defined the lines between this plane and the next plane, going back with a larger wheel, I have a little shelf to snug up against, and it makes it a little easier to use the larger wheel in those small areas. Still trying to keep the sense of that center vein area in the leaf as I'm engraving. Trying not to lose that. Get it nice and thin with that beautiful blue shining through, coming through to suggest a darker leaf than the white petals. Smooth this out a little bit. Get the wheel marks out of it. So it'll be a soft gradation of color. And I'm going to save the rest of the work on that leaf for later, and work on some of the interior of this flower so you can get a sense of working on the petals. And I have some more work to do in here, teasing out a piece that got lost. So fortunately there's enough glass to do that. Okay, I'm going to use this tiny little wheel, and hopefully it'll be the right one, to work on some of those small petals. Okay. I'm going to work on this petal here because it actually has part of it coming over, bending over and in towards the center of the flower. So I'll give you an idea how that needs to be handled. First thing I want to do is clean up this edge so I can see my top edge. And then I'm going to separate the inside of this petal from the part that's curving over. So I'm engraving the inside of this curved leaf, petal. And I'm going fairly deep. And this is the center of the blossom. And so we're seeing a little more color. As we go towards the center, a little bit more blue for indicating the curve, the inside of the curve, as well as the center of the flower, which is usually a little bit darker. Going to round that outside edge so that it has the appearance of folding over. You can see that curved edge on the outside. I still need to sharpen up the planes between the next lower petal, but we're starting to see that curved appearance of the petal. And I'm going to take this off. It will help with visually. All right, now I want to get in there and just really get down to the blue, not all the way, but get it darker, because there's going to be a shadow under that curved petal. And that's how I'm going to give that illusion of the petal curving over. That and sort of the curvature of the top of this pedal. I'm gonna get in there probably later on with something smaller and sharpen up the edge of this curved pedal. But you can see how it's dark. It gives the impression that it's folding over and towards you. I've done the same thing on several of these blossom petals. Okay, and I'm going to do a little bit more shadow. There we go. I could probably, now that I have this smaller wheel in my lathe, work on some of these other foldovers to bring them visually more readable. You're always using the background color for shading, just like you would with a pencil if you're doing a drawing. Right, let's see. The next one I'm going to work on is right here. Actually, I'm going to work on this one. Nope, this one. Probably going to leave this one for later because it's going to be hard to see unless I get the right wheel in there. So I will continue. On some of my shading because I can get into the tiny places with this wheel and define the planes a little better and the edges of the petals. don't want to get it too blue because I want that definition between the flower petals and the leaves, but I want a good definition between the different petals. This is a leaf out here. I think I can go a little darker and sharper. Transition between the flower and the leaf. And just like with any drawing or painting you might do, you put it down and pick it up the next day, you'll instantly see things that needs to be fixed or that doesn't read as well as you thought it did yesterday. So until you put the final finish on your piece, there's always corrections that are being made and adjustments. But it's a wonderful art form. It's a very intimate art form. As you can see, you're very close to your work and able to control every movement and every aspect of your image. We'll start this leaf here, which also has, petal, which also has a fold over. Always amazing how moving just the slightest little bit of glass can make a big difference in how it reads. And it just I'm going to need something smaller still to get down in there, but you can see you're always constantly moving the glass, and you hold the glass with your fingertips so that you can get good movement. So these smaller pieces are lovely for engraving because you're just using your fingertips. Okay, so we have a few more petals to do on this piece, but it's starting to look like a gardenia. There's a lot more work, of course, that needs to be done, but it's a good start. And then, of course, we have this whole side to do. So I've been working on this piece since Sunday, I guess, and so you can see that it's a lot of work, but it's enjoyable, and it's very gratifying to have your imagery go from a flat cartoon image or picture to something that feels alive or looks like it has more life to it. There are what I have to say about engraving is that there are as many styles of engraving as there are engravers, and it ranges from the very traditional, which I would say my work is more towards the traditional end, to the very contemporary. Whatever your desire is to put on glass, it's possible with engraving. I've been either taking engraving classes or teaching engraving classes since 2005, and the majority of the engraving training that I've received has been here at the studio at Corning Museum. Oops. Okay, thank you for joining us here at the engraving room, and I hope you have been inspired to give it a try yourself, and thank you.